Okay, so on Friday we were having a conversation about the tshuva over here is about a fellow who holds other people's money or other not other people's money, other people's items for safekeeping. They're they're picdonot. They're when you put down collateral, so it's almost like he's got a little pawn shop uh, where he lends out people money, and he gets robbed. And when the robbers came, he gave them up the things that, whatever it was that they were looking for. So Rav Sharaga had brought a machlokas between Rashba and Tosfos as to whether a shomer is forced to give something up that's not his, if he gives it to them uh, physically, willingly, is he going to be liable or not? And the Rashba says that there are times when you will be liable if you actually offer the information of where the item is and you give it to them with your hands. And Tosfos says no. Tosfos is of the opinion that a shomer, it is implicit when you give something to a shomer that he's not going to endanger his life. That if people break into his place to be able to get stuff, okay, he can save himself from harm or injury or worse by giving up those collateral items. And that's the opinion of the Rush and then the Mukhe Yosef and other opinions. So he says, V'lachein, v'mikreh hazeh, shemenahel hagamach eino adam ashir. And therefore, in this case, where the owner of the gamach is not a wealthy man, so it's fair to surmise, he says, V'yesh litlos shehaganavim bo rakav or klei kesef shel hagamach. It's fair to surmise that the reason why the robbers targeted his place is because they know that he has other people's property. Upater milashalim aleim. He's going to be exempt. And as the footnote says, Rod Solomar, Dekeven diyesh bazem achloikas atosvus v'harashba, since there's a machlokas in the Rishonim whether a person is liable in such a case because he volunteered the items, Yachol Hashomer Shuhu Muchzak Liton Kimli Kahatosvus Shapoter Apshanasa V'Nosan B'Yah. The shomer can say, I hold like Tosfos. Tosfos says that I'm potter. The kolsha came denira the das maran he kadas Tosfos, and it seems even more so that Rav Sharaga's opinion is to lean towards Tosfos. Why? Because dahine bebeis Yosef evi maran at divrei harav Hamagid. I'm sorry, the Mechaber holds that way because when in his Beis Yosef commentary, he brings the Rav Hamagid, the Magid Mishnah, Shabir B'das Rambam Disvir Leikatosus Kivin Shalochilik Bazeh Im Ha'anosim Yecholim Liton Et HaPikadon Belisha Shoma Yar Ela Hemoto V'Sim Shekain Das Arash. Apparently, that's the opinion of the Rambam as well, according to the Beit Yosef. The Kevin Shagam Maran B'Shulchan Aruch Sham Lochilik Bazeh Nira Disvir Le Debechol Gavnei Potter. And therefore, it seems that the preponderance of the Rishonim are of that opinion, whether the robbers found the item on their own, whether the shomer showed them where the item is, whether he gave it to them himself, it doesn't matter. Umarin Pasa Kedasa Rambam Vahatosus Vaharach, Stas Harash Bashu Das Yichida, and he says, and therefore it's like the Rashba is only a Das Yachid, he's only an individual against a whole team of Rishonim who side with Tosfos. He says, Omnam lichora b'meshek kotav Rabbeinu Hagon hamachaber shlita liftor et menahel hagamach al pi ma shenifsak b'shulchan aruch. He says what Rav Sharaga writes to exempt the shomer based on what the Shulchan Aruch writes. She'im haganovim bo rak biglal sheim shamu ala pikodon az hashomer patur. He says if you can surmise that they came to this guy's place because they had heard that he has someone else's property, l'chora haya nir'el lidon bazeh, De'ein hanidon doma kol kach l'raya. It seems that it's not so analogous, the cases. Dahacha rak acharei sheminal hagamach kibeitz etzlo et kol hapikdonot shel kol halovim yachad. Zema shegarim laganovim lavo b'lignov sikum gadol kazeh. He says, because in our illustration, the way that the shaila is presented here is that the head of the Gemach produced all of the stash of items that had been left with him, all of the silver and the gold, and showed it to the robbers. And that's why the robbers were able to get away with such a large amount. He says, it seems like the person, in other words, it's common knowledge that he keeps items for people. So does that perhaps in some way raise his level of responsibility? Because it's almost like he's got a neon sign saying, other people's stuff is here. And so does he maybe need to fortify his property more than a regular person? Maybe the shomer has a higher level of responsibility. ולא מחמד שהשומר הוא אדם אשר הוא כדומה, ואם כן ייתכן דגם בזה נאמר, הפטור של השולחן ערוך הנ"ל שהשומר פוטר ויש לעיין בזה. He says it's not really clear. And we'd have to examine this a little bit more carefully, whether or not the fact that he is known for this, that he's known for holding on to other people's property, that he has a higher level of responsibility and he could be at least partially liable. So he leaves with it Tzarachian, but Reb Sharagat seems to say that he's going to be off the hook. So anyway, V'lachein b'mikreh hazeh shemenal hagamach eino adam ashir. Okay, we just read that. Omnam ayin od b'nesivis shekasav lechalek bazeh ba'ofanim mesuyamim bein shomer chinam l'shomer sacher ayin sham. He says the Nesivus, however, says that it'll depend on whether he's a shomer chinam or a shomer sacher. If a guy's running a gamach and he gets compensated for it, there may be circumstances where he'll have a higher level of liability. But the case, it seems like, is where the guy's running a gamach for free. Yeah, but it is conceivable. It's conceivable that, you have a guy who's the schlepper, and they're looking for him to do something for the community. So a group of balabatim get together and say, you should run the gamach and we'll pay you a little bit every month. It's conceivable. Okay. So similarly, let's say robbers come and and this guy's holding on to cash that's not his, that was collected by the community for pidyon shvuyim, which is the biggest form of tzedakah, as we know, to ransom hostages. And he doesn't have his own cash. All he can do is give them the cash that has been collected. Even though he may be a man of means, but all of his money is locked away in some other location. He says he would also be exempt in that case because he's money that's set aside for pidyon shvuyim is to help save people's lives by paying money to people who would harm them. So if I'm giving money to a guy who would harm me, then I'm doing pidyon shvuyim on myself, right? Because if I don't give them the money, they're going to beat me up or worse. So that's a form of pidyon shvuyim. But that's provided that the guy collected the money for pidyon shvuyim in general. The pidyon shavui misuyam chayav Shalem et kol hakesef, kevin shezacha bazeh hashavui. If, however, the money was collected for a specific purpose, so here it was collected for, let's say, to ransom back Yankel, who we know is being held, right? And the community takes up a collection for a specific person or specific family, whatever it is. So then I'm not using the money for what it was assigned for if I use it to save my own life. And therefore, while I have every right to save my life with someone else's money, I have to pay back. I have to make restitution after I've saved my life with someone else's property, someone else's money. So that was something else that we had seen. Let me just see. Okay, that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. Oh, okay. Okay, he goes into length in the footnote from about the Nesivos to say whether a person who's a Shomer Sachar versus a Shomer Chinam would be liable in such a situation. But that's essentially the tshuva. That's the whole responsum, is that when you're holding cash that was set aside for a particular tzedakah, and the only way that you can save yourself is by giving them the money, so then if it's for the mitzvah of tzedakah in general, then you have a right to use that money because you now become the charity case. But if it was collected for a specific purpose, then you're not, the Gabbai Tzedakah is not allowed to change the purpose of the charity, and therefore he can save his life, save himself from injury and the like, but he would have to make restitution afterwards. Okay, that's with money. But when it comes to objects that are kept for safekeeping, a person can say, Kimli, I paskin like Tosfos. And Tosfos says that it's implicit when someone gives you an object, a collateral item for safekeeping, it's implicit, it's tacit in the agreement that if someone were to come and try and threaten my life, if I don't relinquish the item, then it's permissible for me to relinquish the item. And I'm not going to be liable to make restitution afterwards. So in the case of the Gemach, I think it was it Hal or someone else who asked the question, will the guy still owe the money? The guy who borrowed the money? The answer is yes. He borrowed money from a Gemach. He put forward a collateral item, but the collateral item cannot be used now by the Gemach because it was stolen. So yeah, he would still be liable, would seem, be liable to pay back the loan. He still owes the money. He took a loan.
Needs the collateral. Otherwise, the collateral's gone and the money's gone. Okay, let's say I borrowed money on something from the bank. And the bank takes collateral, my car. Okay. So my car is stolen. I'm not giving the money back for the car is gone.
Banks go after something else.
So it never changes. You basically owe the money for the rest of your life. Like if it was my father's watch given as collateral, you can't replace that with money. It seems incomplete. That's what it is. Right?
Well, I mean, the argument is that the guy who's holding the collateral is not liable for violent theft. You know,
There has to be some form of appreciation. I wonder what would happen.
That's right.
The good news of the go to the mountains.
yeah. It also, like when you go to a pawn shop, they have all these bars and everything is,
Right.
with buzzers and everything, because people know that they're a target. So maybe there is a higher level of shmira that a known gemach has to put on.
Yeah, shotgun.
Oh yeah, really? Even in Canada?
And shotgun.
Blame Canada. Okay. They, although maybe they have a shotgun underneath the counter. It's not visible. Okay.
Yeah, someone's got that room.
Okay. Okay. Sachar dira. V'nignevu habalone gaz shahayu munachim bachutz. That's not baloney. It's balone gaz. Okay. so, so what are balone gaz? Anyone know what that is? It's the gas capsules. A balloon is a capsule. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you had to come from Eretz Yisrael to learn to get your ulpan lesson. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, a balloon is a capsule because it looks like a balloon, right? And so it's a capsule that contains gas. It's like what do we use for our barbecues? What is that called? Propane, like a propane tank. Yeah. So they have these propane tanks that are more narrow and tall. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So a guy rents an apartment and and the gas capsules are stolen shahayu munachim bachutz that were left outside the apartment. So ani chatan chadash v'sacharti dira sheyesh ba balone gaz. So I'm a newlywed, and I rented an apartment that has right outside of it these gas capsules. Now, what do they use that for? Is that used for natural gas for heating? I guess for stoves. Okay. ושבוע אחרי שנכנסתי לדירה, נגנבו בלוני הגז שהיה בחצר. A week after I took possession of the apartment, the gas tanks were stolen. מי חייב לשלם על בלוני הגז החדשים שיוזמנו? So who's now liable to pay for the new gas tanks that are now going to be ordered? Is it the landlord or is it the tenant? So this is a landlord-tenant shaila. Okay. So what, Marv, based on your knowledge of Canadian law, something gets stolen off the property of a tenant, but it's something that is normally left, let's say, outside. The guy has not done anything negligent that the landlord wouldn't have done himself.
Who owns it? It's probably the landlord owns it.
Right, right.
Owner.
Yeah, I mean, you could find a similar scenario with garbage bins. A lot of times those garbage bins get stolen there, but they're the property of the homeowner. He's got to pay money to replace them. He's got a tenant. A barbecue on a deck. There you go. Right. Although I guess you'd have to assess, did he leave the backyard gate open? Did he not leave it open? Okay, anyway. So this is the shaila. So tshuva. Yesh lanu arba'a sugei shomrim b'dinam shlosha. We have four different kinds of shomers that are mentioned by the Mishnah, and there are three levels within these four shomers as far as levels of liability. They are shomer chinam, shomer sachar, socher, v'shoel. This should be familiar to most of us. A shomer chinam is someone who watches something for free. A shomer sachar is someone who watches something for compensation. A socher is a renter, a leaser, someone who leases property. And a shoel is someone who borrows property without compensation. Bilahalacha socher dino kishomer sacher. And so the overlap, which is why you only have three levels instead of four, is that a renter has the same status as a paid guard, meaning that their level of liability is v'chol shomer sacher chayv b'gneva v'aveda. Someone who is renting property is liable for theft and loss. And therefore, at first glance, it would seem that something that is stolen from the property, the socher, the renter, the tenant who's paying rent, should be held liable for theft and loss. This is theft, so he should be held liable. However, aval b'mikreh hazeh yesh liftor et hasocher me'at tashlumim. But here's a reason to exempt the socher, for the renter, from payment. Afal pi shadino kishomer sacher, even though normally that would be his obligation. Kevin shahamaskir hu sheiniach et balone hagaz ba'oto makom. Why? Because the landlord is the one who left these gas tanks on the property, accessible to the public. V'hu yada shahasocher lo ose lahem shemira miyuchedet. And he knows that the tenant is not doing any kind of guardianship over these tanks. In other words, it's something that is a common practice to leave these tanks out in the open. Out the property, there was no kind of explicit clause to the tenant. Make sure these things don't get stolen, even though I've left them out in the open, right? Which would be incongruous. How could a landlord expect the tenant to do a higher level of shmira than his own shmira? Okay. Bezer kamo shehitnu beneim b'mefurash shahashmira tiyeh b'tzura kazu shahabalonim yiyu b'chatzer b'li shmira nosefet. And it's as if there was an implicit agreement between the two of them that his level of guardianship on these tanks would be that they could remain, as long as they remain in their place, you don't have to watch them any further. And basically, that's your level of responsibility. Don't move the tanks. That's the implicit agreement. Yeah. Right. In other words, as long as you do what is expected of you to do, your level of guardianship, so then even though a shomer and a socher are normally liable for theft and loss, yeah, I mean, that's essentially what he's saying. When it's something that, a car, you will be liable for, because that's part of the contract, is that you're liable if the car gets stolen. But here he's saying that it's not it's better than that, to the advantage of the renter, because the item that is being leased, at least this segment of what is being leased, is being left out in the open with the understanding of the owner that these are not meant to be guarded. There's certain things that you don't think to guard. You don't think to guard your barbecue grill that you leave outside, that someone's going to come and take it. You don't think to guard, let's say, the things in the garage that are not under lock and key, or the things that are resting on the side of the house, like the gas tanks, or the garbage bins, or what's another example? Air conditioning unit, right? Right. So, v'hamasker hiskim lekach. And this was something that the landlord, the owner, really understands implicitly. V'yesh lanu klal shematne shomer sachar liot kishomer chinam u'v'davar shebemamon tano kayam. We have a general principle in the Gemara that even if I am a shomer sachar, I can negotiate to that my level of liability is only that of a shomer chinam, if that's part of the contract. So it's almost like it's implicit in this particular contract that anything that's left outside by the landlord is beyond the purview of the renter to be responsible for. Yeah. Why would maybe he'd accept it.
The advantage of Shomer Sachar. You're making conditions to be like a Shomer Chinam.
Well, it's the advantage of the renter. It's to the advantage of the renter. He says, listen, I'm paying you $5,000 a month to live in your house, but I'm not interested in being liable for theft and loss. You get the insurance policy if you're concerned about theft and loss. I'm not taking responsibility for that, and they put that in the contract. So there's every good reason for a guy to say, I'm paying a premium to rent your house. I don't want to be held liable if any people break in and steal the stuff. As long as I keep the front door locked and I keep the back sliding door locked, you can't hold me liable. Yes, yeah, right. You're absolutely right. The landlord can demand that, and that's usually built into the contract, right? Yeah. Oh, really?
You can put anything in a contract as long as it's signed.
Kind of like hotels, there's legislation that caps some stuff that's in the contents of things, $40. Contents.
Oh, yeah.
You have booze and soaps.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, but you like a baby.
You mean as far as what the hotel's liability is? So if someone breaks into my hotel room, right? So they are a shomer also, yeah.
But there's caps on the value that they're liable for.
You would have to
Diamond
pay for
ring.
that yourself.
Right.
Whatever.
Unless you give it to them and they put it in their safe, right?
Well, I'm just saying, negotiate not only the terms of your deal, but and also negotiate the damages.
Okay.
So in Israel, those balloons outside would be the tenant's responsibility. Even if they're on the roof or outside, like mine are outside the property, someone will walk by, pick it up. Landlord.
But
wouldn't care.
the landlord what?
Wouldn't care.
What do you mean he wouldn't care? Who do they belong to? Whose property is it?
It belongs to the property, but in Israel, the only thing you get in a rental is the building. And anything that's attached. So if you turn the property upside down, it doesn't fall off. It belongs to the owner. But a balloon would be the tenant's responsibility.
Even though Rav Shiraga is saying that it's not. He's
That's right.
he's
I would say
possible.
also, my
That-
contract
that is
that
not
means
what
people-
happens.
that people would-
Everything.
Everything. Except for I have insurance on this place that burns down. That's it.
That's
So
it.
so
If
one
the-
second.
If the place burns down, it's my.
It's my responsibility.
But if something,
They pay their property tax. They pay.
Yeah.
No, but I'm saying, so let's say someone takes an Airbnb on your house. They're not going to be liable for the balloon, for the gas
But
tank.
I talk about long, I don't know if it's a difference. between A
For me,
week,
it would be a
a
different
different thing,
contract.
as opposed to being someone who's staying there for 5 years. So
So-
they're responsible for everything. I don't know.
As is.
Unless something blows up in the house.
Crazy. It's a crazy thing.
They are responsible for everything. I don't hear boo.
You have to, yeah, or
Okay, we're gonna hold it today. We'll continue this discussion. Everyone have a meaningful Yom HaZikaron.